Dear Father Simon and the Collective, I listen to the confession slot every day on my way home from work, and I laugh and gasp with horror, sometimes forgive, sometimes don't, but always I admire the bravery of your congregation as they enter the confessional and seek redemption from yourselves and your kind, lovely, intelligent, rational, forgiving listeners. I think Sally's worried about this. And then I think, well, who am I to judge? Let he who has not sinned cast the first stone, the Bible teaches us, and so it is with guilt and fear I approach the Radio 2 Drive Time Collective and seek forgiveness for a misdemeanour whose burden of guilt I have carried for too long. I live in the northeast of Scotland, in a rural spot, which is also the home of many of our finest malt whiskies. I have lived here all my life, and I think it's fair to say a good proportion of the population are in some way connected to the Scotch whisky industry, either directly or through one of these subsidiary industries like transport, farming or coppersmiths. My house at the time of this incident was up a rough track of a narrow country road that led to a famous distillery, and as such the big tanker lorries that delivered the grain, collected the whisky and all the byproducts were going past my road end many times a day, and at that time they were very distinctive for their bright-coloured livery. My squeeze at the time, Father Simon, worked for the transport company that did the delivering and fetching, so he was often driving past my road in the course of his work. The incident in question happened one beautiful summer's day, just after I'd returned from a hard day's work, showing our lovely visitors around another famous distillery in the region. I was very hot, so I decided to change into a floaty summer dress, as you do when the sun is shining. Is that what you do, Bobby?
Always.
Always, thank you. It was also a Wednesday night, which meant I had to pull our wheelie bin to the end of our track in order for it to be collected the next day. Feeling all summery, I texted my squeeze and asked him if he'd like to call in past the house after work, to which he replied he was just at the distillery by my house collecting whisky. I decided to go to the end of the road and give him a wave as he drove past. So I collected the wheelie bin, walked to the end of the road and waited for him to come past. Sure enough, within minutes, I could see the distinctive colour of the lorry approaching down the road. Now, maybe it was the heat. I don't know, but I decided I'd give him a bit more than a wave. So I popped myself up on top of the wheelie bin, and then, and there's no other way to describe it really, I pulled down the strapless top of my dress. Just as the lorry passed, I threw my arms aloft, threw out a big smile and bared all to the lorry and the rest of the hometown. What I heard next will live with me forever, Father Simon. The blood-curdling screech of brakes followed by the crunch of 40 tons of Arctic lorry bearing our precious whisky, leaving the road and coming adrift in the field. Horrified, I jumped off the wheelie bin, ran to have a look at the scene of devastation unfolding at the end of my track, just taking time to haul up my dress and cover myself, obviously. To my horror and devastation, it wasn't the cheery face of my squeeze that greeted me. Instead, it was the shocked and terrified face of a gentleman quite near to retirement, unless he'd aged 50 years in the last few minutes. Yes, you guessed it, my dear friends, I'd flashed the wrong lorry. So I obviously need to seek an awful lot, a lorry load of forgiveness, please, Father Simon. Firstly, and obviously, from that darling man who never once grasped me to the authorities, but also from the whisky company, get this, whose lorry I trashed, and for the 22,000 litres of whisky that never made it to the destination. Also, I suppose, from the people at the end of this supply chain for the loss of their precious nectar. And finally, from my then squeeze, who never got his little wave as he drove past, but instead was held up for about 2 hours whilst they pulled the other lorry out of the field.
Brilliant.
How about that? See, she was just trying to be friendly, but...
Very friendly.
It's kind of distracting, I suppose, is what you could say. That guy thinking, I'm just making a little delivery. Oh, I say. As they say in the northeast. So let's see what Sister Rebecca
like
makes
in all
of
these
that.
things, I think she should have waited until she saw the whites of his eyes until she did the deed. Actually, I think she obviously went too early. But I think the thought behind it was very sweet, wasn't it? Because obviously it was meant for her squeeze. I'm sure that the whisky company would have been covered by insurance. So I'm going to argue that there was no harm done, actually. And the guy who was driving probably had quite a
Story
different,
to tell.
nice day and a good anecdote to tell. Exactly. So I'm going to forgive.
Very tolerant, very understanding. Now, the voice of travel, though, is going to come... I know she's going to come out all austere and say that's not the right way to behave in front of traffic.
Well, the thing is, I understand the situation. Also, it's all good intention, to cheer the squeeze on. That's fine, like... however,
Hello.
I think I was thinking of it. What amazed me is she managed to sit on top of the wheelie bin. I never would have been able to get up there without
That's an
falling
interesting
off.
point. I
Yes,
mean, this is really quite a display that was happening.
I thought she was going to do a Marilyn Monroe, but she didn't. So what I would say is intentions were good. However, this is a perfect example of good intentions going bad.
Yes.
I am really sorry about that much whiskey going lost. And also, what a lovely man to say, I crashed my lorry and it was nobody's fault. It wasn't that lady who flashed me. I mean, she could have been, what a great, lovely man. And because he forgave her, I think I have to say, I have to forgive her too.
Brother Michael.
I can't stop smiling, imagining the driver's face as he drove past. And no wonder he careered off the road. But how much whiskey was lost?
22,000
litres.
It's a lot, isn't it?
Of whiskey. That is a lot of whiskey, but I have to, I think, agree with Rebecca as well. This chap, I'm sure, has a story to tell, which I'm sure he dines out on this day. I think Sally said he was nearing retirement. What a way to go out. Yeah, I've got to forgive